All right. Well, Rusty Roof, we have a ton of busy people on this podcast, but judging purely from the amount of organizations, companies, and day to day habits that you're involved in, I think that you may be one of the busiest people. So I really appreciate that you're making the time to talk to us today. So, for listeners who are not familiar with Rusty Roof, he is an angel investor, philanthropist, chairman of several boards. You've served on the advisory committee for the arts and the national co chair for technology under Obama. And you've also found the time to blog regularly. I think that you've been doing a daily blog Monday through Friday for like 15 years.
True.
And you've also written two books, the most recent of which is one that came out in September, Faith Code. And so we're just really excited to have you today, Rusty. But I know I've been talking a lot. I think maybe a good place to start is maybe if we just kind of heard your story and what got you interested in all these different interests.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. This is fun. Yeah, it's a circuitous life story, if you will. Grew up in southern Indiana, born in Kentucky, and right from the beginning, sort of the tone of maybe where I was going to spend my time later in life was set. My father was a radio and television personality. So he was a radio disc jockey and then did some television in Louisville, Kentucky. And so I kind of grew up around, big fish in a small pond, a bit of a celebrity, if you will, family. And my mother still says to this day that my first words were "Daddy talks." I thought that was really cool. I mean, that's what I wanted to do. So I spent my college years getting myself ready and prepared to be a radio disc jockey. And I started working on the radio when I was 18 and bounced around. It's basically how I paid my way through college, was working on the radio. I went to two different colleges. I started off at Hanover College, a very small liberal arts school in southern Indiana, and then transferred in my junior year to Purdue, which is a much bigger school in northern Indiana. And one of the reasons why I transferred there is because the Lafayette area had 7 commercial radio stations. So I actually got my radio job set up before I was accepted to transfer to Purdue. I don't know how things would have worked out if I wouldn't have got accepted to go to school and all of a sudden I've got a job. But it's really all I wanted to do. I did a bunch of different things when I was in college, a bunch of leadership things and different groups, and studied about a lot of other things, but I don't even think they offer the degree anymore. But my undergrad degree is in radio and television. It's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be just like Dad. And then I got the chance. And I was recruited before I graduated from college to work at a radio station in Indianapolis, which is at the time was a mid-sized on its way to major market. And after I graduated, I started working there and didn't like it. Thought it was just not what I signed up for. And I had been working all these years in different radio stations, but all of a sudden you get to this certain size market and a lot of your freedom, a lot of your creativity is taken away from you. The program director basically scripts all the liner notes. You talk for maybe 10 to 15 seconds every 8 minutes, between 2 songs, and otherwise you just sit around and be bored. And I realized that, boy, there's more to life than this. And I'm sitting there going, wow, I went to college. I'm, trying to learn all these leadership and management principles, and I'm working for people who don't understand any of that. Am I really in the right place? And then I also had a bit of a moral crisis because the sister station that I was working for, I was doing overnights actually at the time and filling in at different hours. And one morning I walked down to the sister station and down the hallway, and there was a big pile of cocaine and a bunch of underage kids in there. And I was not a prude. I'd sort of lost a decade to fun and drugs myself. But I was sitting there going, wait. If the cops come in here right now, they take us all out, right? Even though I'm down the hall doing my thing. And I'm like, this is just, I got to do something else. And so I ended up back getting my graduate degree at Purdue. I ended up back on the radio back in Lafayette. It was easy for me. It was if there was such a thing as easy money, it was sort of easy money for me to do radio while I was also going to school. And then when I graduated with my master's degree, I had 3 opportunities. One to go back on the radio out here in San Francisco. One was to sell Yoplait yogurt in Wausau, Wisconsin. And the third one was to be a personnel trainee at a company called Pratt & Whitney that made airplane engines. I knew nothing about airplane engines. I knew nothing about selling Yoplait yogurt, but this idea of going into business, and what I particularly liked about the Pratt & Whitney opportunity was that they were going to train me. Like I was going to be in a training program. And I was like, oh, wow. Somebody's going to take a kid that has no idea what really business is about, but wants to learn, and they're going to train me. Let's do that. Let's try that. So I moved to Connecticut, and I spent 2 years there learning all kinds of different areas of the human resource world. Then got recruited to Frito-Lay, which was part of the PepsiCo company. Spent 10 years with them, bouncing around between Frito-Lay, Pizza Hut, and Pepsi International, and I got a phenomenal experience. But I always knew that I wanted to go back into entertainment and media, and I'd always told the headhunters, and it's a good lesson for any of us, if you want to do something, if you've got a lighthouse in the future, out there in the future, and you want to sail your boat towards it, you've got to be able to describe what it is for other people to help you. And I couldn't tell them really what I absolutely wanted to do, but I just said, look, the only thing that's going to get me out of PepsiCo is take me back to entertainment and media in some kind of leadership capacity, influence capacity. And in the 4 years before I kept telling all these things, in 1994, when I saw the internet show up, I started to say, or high tech that enables entertainment or media. And so in late 1997, I got a telephone call from a recruiter from Heidrick and Struggles that said, hey, we haven't really had a database this long, but every time we've called you, you've said the same thing over and over and over. So I think we know what you want, and I think I have it for you. And I said, what's that? He goes, well, it's a job being the head of human resources and talent for a company called Electronic Arts. And I said, what's an Electronic Art? And he goes, it's a video game company. And I was like, I don't play video games. I did play video games at one time, back when you could stand there for as long as you wanted to, playing Galaga or any of those kind of games. So all of a sudden, Galaga got replaced with Mortal Kombat, and I was like, I can't play this. I don't have enough money. And so I really didn't understand video games whatsoever. But the guy told me, he said, listen, this is an entertainment and media form, and it's going to get bigger, and it's enabled by high tech, and I think you should look at it. So I did. And after many interviews and going back and forth between living in my wife and I in Connecticut at the time, back and forth between the Bay Area 3 times, trying to figure out, am I going to do this? We finally just said, yeah, let's do it. And so we literally took a left-hand turn and came out west in October of 1998, which, to set a time frame for people, that was the same month that Google was funded. So it was still early days. There was no, Facebook hadn't shown up, social media, none of that kind of stuff. We were basically, it was, some technology and hard technology. There were video games, and there was this idea that maybe you could have search engines and use the internet. I mean, you have to remember that's only like 4.5 years after the first web browser showed up. So these were early days. And I was really fortunate because I ended up coming to a company that we were growing. Every day got better. And we would say, it's a great day because somebody turned 10 years old today. And, the industry was booming. And I had an amazing 7-year run there. Did all kinds of interesting things. The more the company grew, the more responsibility I got. And along the way, I'd gotten some involvement in the music side of the business at EA, and I was still fascinated about music and what music could do. And I'm sitting there going, well, wait a minute. The first song of Madden Football probably gets 1 billion impressions, give or take a couple 100 million. I mean, because every time you load it, you play it over and over and over, and you got people sitting there. This is back before we had connected consoles. And, so you're sitting there and you got four of your buddies on the couch, and they're watching, and then they play it, and then it gets played over and over. And I said, we really should take this music thing seriously. And so I was fortunate enough to get involved with hiring a guy named Steve Schnurr to come in and run the music business at EA for us. And at the same time, there was a gentleman that I knew from Yahoo who was the president and COO of the time. And he called me up one day and he said, "Hey, there's a company I want to talk to you about. I'm the new chair of the company." I said, "Oh, that's great." He goes, "Can I come over to your place?" And yeah, I said, "Sure, come on over." So he came over. We sat in my conference room that was outside of my cubicle, and he and another guy, and they explained this company, Snowcap, which was going to clean up the peer-to-peer market. And at the end of the presentation, I said, "So what? How can I help you? You trying to recruit somebody? You trying to do that?" He goes, "No." He goes, I think you should come and run this company." And he goes, "I think you've got the skills, the talents, you understand the industry, you're a technology geek, you'd be great." And I was like, wow, that's pretty wild. The other guy sitting in the room, by the way, was Sean Fanning, who was, depending upon how old you are, famous or infamous, the creator of the original Napster. And the original Napster turned the world upside down. And when Napster got shut down, he immediately went over with the team and they created Snowcap with the idea that they would take their black hats off and put their white hats on and clean up the music industry on the digital side. So after thinking a lot about it, praying about it, talking to my wife about it, I've been helping CEOs for 15, almost 20 years become CEOs. I said, maybe I should give it a try. So I did. So I jumped over. In 2005, was fortunate enough to have a great team around me, and we did the whole venture thing. We raised $15 million. We deployed that money, ended up being the music provider for MySpace, created a really cool thing called the Snowcap My Store, which was the first place on the internet to be able to actually download a digital good without having to leave the web page itself. So it was embedded on a MySpace page, so an artist could sell their music legitimately, and it was all good. And then a thing called the Great Recession showed up in 2008. We were out there trying to raise money for the next round, and there was no money to be had anywhere. And so we decided we would sell the company before maybe what the end would be. And so we sold the company to a company called iMeme. And iMeme was you have to think about Snowcap was that we were the precursor to SoundCloud. We sold it to iMeme, which was the precursor to Spotify, doing streaming of music. And that's how these cycles go, right? That's how the cycles go. Sometimes you're the first in and you work really hard, you try to figure things out, and you just don't get there. But the second guy gets to come along and go, well, I take all those learnings and make it work. So I did that for 3 years, sold the company 2008. And then after that, I just started sitting on boards, advising, consulting, got invited to be a founding board member of the company Glassdoor. So I was there before we had a PowerPoint and got to spend 11 and a half years on that journey as a board member and a subject matter expert for the company. Did a bunch of PR spokesperson stuff for them, and we sold the company to Indeed in 2018 for unicorn money, over $1 billion. And then along the way, I also got invited to do some fun things like be on the Grammy Foundation board, become the chairman of the Grammy Foundation. Did that for a while. Was invited by the Obama administration to lead technology for Obama in the 2012 reelect. Was fortunate enough to be able to do that. Had a great 16 months in that experience, and then the president appointed me to the President's Advisory Board for the Arts for the Kennedy Center. All along the way, being involved with a theater board and doing a bunch of things there. So I've had a very varied background. Some would say, a jack of all trades, a master of none. But I'd like to think that I can still go deep enough with different companies that I advise and consult and invest in. And then I've been very blessed to have a wonderful wife, married 29 years, just the two of us, no children. Congrats. But a French bulldog, which is like having a perpetual 2-year-old. And so, God has been good, and I've had a faith journey along the way. Just published this book, The Faith Code, with my pastor from Cornerstone SF, Terry Brisbane, and that's been really fun. And we're out here promoting the book and talking about it. And it's basically a book where he explores the teachings and principles of Jesus and through parables, and then I apply everyday life examples. Both of us using the technology metaphor of are you building your life as a platform or a framework, or are you building your life as just an app? And as we know, apps crash easily, apps come and go, they're in, they're out. Many parts of our lives are just basically applications. They come and go. But the platform of our life, the framework of our life, has to be one that is strong, dependable, consistent, that you can build those applications on top of. And if you don't have that platform or framework right, then the rest of it doesn't work, as we know. And what Terry and I do in the Faith Code is go back and explore those principles, go deep into it, and then try to remind everybody that just like we have to update our framework, and it's going back to the source code that's given to us. So that's my story. Long-winded, but hopefully not too long-winded.
No, that was great. There's definitely lots to unpack. I have a lot of questions that popped up along the way, but I just wanted to say that one thing that I thought was really cool is that, you started your career being like, I want to be a radio DJ. And then you end it, or not end it, but like you end up being appointed by the president himself, and being in Silicon Valley, like before it takes off, and being able to consult. And Glassdoor, as somebody who worked in tech for a long time, such an instrumental part of leading positive change, I think, within the tech industry. I think it's maybe really inspiring for people to know that they can graduate, find the job that they thought they wanted, realize that it's not the job that they thought it was, and then still go on and find success in a different path. But one thing I wanted to ask you about is in Faith Code, one of the quotes that stuck out to me is that you said, who we are today may be inefficient for tomorrow. And going back to your point about framework, we have to constantly update ourselves because we're not applications, right? So one thing I wanted to ask you is that what are some good habits that have remained constant in your life throughout your journey?
First, let me hit this idea of being sort of ineffective or inefficient for the future of who we are today.
Sure.
That's called growing. That's called learning. That's called, trying to make sure that you are staying current. And, to your point of, what do I do to sort of keep myself updated and to stay ahead? Because if I hadn't stayed ahead, I don't think I would be here where I am right now. I think I would have been behind, right? So you only get you can stay with the pack, but what you really want to do is you want to be just a little bit ahead of the pack. You don't necessarily need to be on the bleeding edge, right? So you don't want to be that person that just tries everything for the sake of trying everything. But I do believe that you have to expand and have a growth mindset. What I do is I used to call them the 3 M's that I thought would keep me culturally relevant, because I do think that having cultural relevancy is part of what keeps you young, but also keeps you aware of what's going on there. And I call them the 3 M's, which meant that I listened to all kinds of different music, new music, to try to understand what's going on in the music world, and then try to understand, go one step deeper into, well, okay, why is Taylor Swift Taylor Swift? And what is Taylor Swift doing that other people aren't doing that's making the difference? Okay. So I think music is a great cultural touchstone to try to understand. I think music can do that for us. Movies can do that for us. To stay culturally relevant, understanding what's going on in movies. And now you can do that through television, through serialized, basically the episodic TV that we get today, 8-part story, on Netflix or Hulu or whatever, or have turned out to be elongated movies, just chopped up. And I think that's another way to stay culturally relevant to understand. And then I also used to read a stack like this of magazines every month that I would subscribe to across all kinds of different areas. I do that less now. I do it more so online, but you get the point. Those are areas that I think, help me stay relevant or help me stay sort of on top of those things. The other things that I do I try to boot up the same way every day, and the reason I try to boot up and start my day the same way every day is because if our phones or our laptops or our tablets randomly booted up, the inefficiency would drive us crazy. Right? I mean, imagine that your homepage opened up differently every day.
Right.
Right. And you're expecting this and you've got that, or you've got these things bookmarked and they're not there. Well, that gives us a predictability. That gives us something to count on to be able to do the things on top. And in order for us to be able to do all the things in life that we want to do, we need to have a predictability underneath us. And so I try to boot up the same way every day, what I read, what I study, time that I spend, when I work out. I mean, sometimes it drives Patty crazy, my wife, because I become rigid that way. But I think that allows me to be able to have the creativity or the time to be able to do things on top of those things that I couldn't have planned, right? I couldn't have planned it. If I don't get that stuff out of the way early in the day and I just let things slide by, or I'm lazy about it, then later in the day, I'm either trying to catch up or I've lost the day. And so those things have become important as I've realized, it's a little bit like, a great cinematographer. A great cinematographer knows their tools so well, and they shoot the same way every time so that they're very predictable, and they know that. But then they can add creativity. But they don't come in every day and go, oh, let's shoot this scene in a different way or in a different order, or hey, I'm gonna turn this lens backwards today. They don't do that. They have a way of doing it, and then they put creativity on top of it, which is what I try to do with my life.
The second question was, do you have a specific superpower that you believe is like something that is maybe a little bit unique to you that you have utilized in your career?
Yeah, I am told by people that I can find an analogy for anything, that I can find a metaphor or an analogy to help compare one thing to another. And I used to not think that was a big deal. Yeah, I mean, you have to explain to people, the way to help them understand things, or you have to give them some analogy or metaphor to get them to understand. But over the years, I've recognized that can be a bit of a superpower, like pattern recognition, saying that, oh, this looks like that, or I've seen this before. And if you take this, and this of this and put it over here, it's applicable. And that it really helps people that haven't seen those things or don't have that experience or can't find their way to understand what it could be, that if you can paint that picture for them, it just opens up their mind. It gives them a way to go, oh, I get it. Now, what about this and what about that? And then we could build on it. So I think being able to have pattern recognition and carry these analogies and metaphors is a bit of a superpower of mine, if I can say that humbly.
Yeah. Well, I asked the question, so I think any response is totally fair and not pretentious in any way. But I think that is a great superpower, actually. I think that a lot of like the most successful writers of our time, or really successful scientists that you'll see in podcasts and stuff, their ability, their strength is to be able to take these really complex things and make them simple. I mean, that's like one of the things Stephen Hawking was known for, even though I've read a few of his books and I still feel pretty confused at times. But, I think that is especially relevant with how fast things are changing nowadays all the time. Generational signifiers happen like every 5 years now. So it's really useful to be able to recognize patterns and to say, hey, this is just like this other thing that you may have been familiar with.
Yeah. I mean, just really this week, Johnny, just this week, Sam Altman out. right? He gets
Right.
kicked out of OpenAI, right? By the board, a board coup, and then shows up the next day being hired by Microsoft to come in and lead their efforts. Tomorrow, it might be he's back at OpenAI. Who knows, right? But
Yeah.
there was another guy that the same thing happened to. Same thing happened to him. On top of the world, one of the smartest guys anybody ever ran into, got kicked out of his company, the company that he founded, by his board because of disagreements of where the company wanted to go, and he jumped over and started something else. You know who I'm talking about? It happened to Steve Jobs, right, when he was kicked out of Apple, by
Yeah.
the board, and
That's right, yeah.
and so yeah, so he gets kicked out and he goes over to and he creates Next, or goes into that company, and he's running Next, and then eventually he gets invited back to Apple, and then the second act of Steve Jobs was bigger than the first act. But I'm watching all this stuff with OpenAI and Sam Altman and Greg Brockman and the whole team, and I'm going, I've seen this movie. I saw this movie. It's called Apple, and it all ends fine. It ends fine. Now, it's happening at TikTok speed. It took 12 years for Steve to be invited back to Apple.
Yeah.
So this is TikTok speed, but it's just a pattern of business that if you've seen it, you've seen it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, history is silicate. I always have a hard time saying this word.
Circular could be either one, circular or secular.
I think that's what it is. I think I'm trying to say secular, and then I try and say both at the same time.
It's funny.
Thank you. I appreciate you
circular,
hopping in
yes.
to help me out with that. But I like that you made the comparison with Steve Jobs and Sam Altman. But one of the things that I love about your philosophy in business, and particularly your work with Glassdoor, I think just overall, and going back to your first book, is I think that I appreciate in a world where everything is kind of measured by stock price, shareholder value, P&L statements. And I think what gets lost in that is sometimes the ethics of managing a company and being human. And I think this kind of speaks to your first experience at the radio show that you mentioned, not wanting to be at a place where ethics were kind of lower on the totem pole in terms of what people were concerned with. So, you've advised and consulted for so many different companies. I'm curious to hear your perspective on, how you advise an more ethical management style for people, and how do you think that companies benefit from maintaining a more ethical approach in terms of managing their people?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I am adamant with companies that I advise or I get involved with that they have a published statement of values and principles. And it's not the fact that they have some words that they put up on the wall. It's the fact that they went through a process, a decision-making process, a consensus process, first of all, to get to those words. And then by publishing it and putting it on the wall, they are holding themselves through others accountable to do those things. Because if you tell others that these are our values and principles, and then you totally ignore them or don't abide by them or practice values and principles that are opposite of them, you will be called out. It will catch up with you. And so the journey of deciding what they are and then using them as an accountability tool for the company can only do good. It can only be good for a company. And I think that these things are really important. Some people say they're so easy to do. If you just slap a bunch of words together, you and a couple of people, and you say, that's it, we're good, then you haven't done the hard work. Because to get to something that you're going to be held accountable to is really hard, right? I mean, because you have to prioritize, and prioritizing, should be painful. You have to decide it, not this, but this. Well, if that, then what this? And then it's just like how we use our time, right? We can spend our time, we can waste our time, or we can invest our time. And
love that.
We have to be ruthless in the prioritization. And sometimes that prioritization is painful because we have to not do some things that we would like to do in order to do things that we need to do. And so I'm really passionate about those values and principles in business. And the reason that you mentioned my first book, which was called Talent Force, and the reason I wrote that book along with my co-author, Hank Stringer, and the reason I got involved with Glassdoor, and the reason that I've co-founded an executive search firm that uses generative AI and machine learning to assist in the process is because at the basic core of business, one of the most fundamentally important critical decisions that are made is who do you hire? Who do you decide you're going to bring into the company and hire for a position? And it is fundamental. It's foundation. It's a cornerstone decision. And what I see happening in business is that too many people take that decision and make it a decision that feels very laissez-faire. I'm really not, somebody else handles that. I'm not really involved. Hey, if it doesn't work out, it's all fine. We can just hire somebody else. Hey, hurry up. Let's get this job filled. No, I know they're not perfect, but we'll teach them. I mean, we'll go through all of those different things. And then what happens is if that hire doesn't work out, the company hurts. Not terribly, usually, but the company does hurt. The company recovers. But the human being that's caught in that bad decision doesn't always recover. And in fact, a bad hiring decision can haunt someone for the rest of their career. If you think about, the chief financial officer who gives up her job in Buffalo to move to St. Louis for another company, she upends not only where she lives, but the kids got to come out of school. Her trailing spouse gives up their job. They all moved to St. Louis. She was doing great in the job that she was in. They were really sorry she left. They counteroffered, but she still left. She goes there. They sell the home that they had. They get to St. Louis. Things are great. And then 6 months later, somebody walks into her office and says, "Hey, I'm sorry, but things just aren't working out." And she's, "Well, what are you talking about?" "Well, you're just not the cultural fit we thought you were going to be." Or, "Hey, we missed some things in what we thought you could do or what we needed. And we're really sorry. And we take some of this responsibility and we'll give you, a severance. It won't be much. You've only been here for 6 months, but you should be fine." And now she's out. And then, then the kids are wondering, well, why is mommy home crying at the kitchen table? What's going on? How come things aren't happy around the house? The spouse is like, "Well, maybe I can go back to work, but I just got a job. I just got this job. Now what do I do next? Where do we go?" So everything turns upside down. Everything's upside down. And that woman, next time she's in an interview, somebody says, "So, wow, you got a great experience, but tell me about those 6 months. What was that about?" And she's looking the recruiter in the eye and trying to tell the truth. But, the recruiter, she's looking in the eye, and the recruiter's got like, is that really what happened? I mean, could have been something worse, And so now she's on the defensive for years and years to come as she's trying to explain those 6 months. And then, and then we wonder why those kids who were 8 and 10 years old at the time go off, grow up, go to college, get their first job. And somebody's like, "Hey, we we want you to do this, or we want you to do that, or we want you to move here, or we want you to do that. And then in the tape that's playing in their head is like, well, why would I do that? Because big corporations do what they did to my mom. Why would I give myself? Why would I allow myself to go through what my mom went through? So these bad hiring decisions, they have a real impact, and they have a generational impact. They have I didn't even mention the friends, right? Friends who have to go through this experience with someone who sits there on the other side and draws conclusions. Believe me, they draw conclusions, and they side on the side of the employee, not on the side of the company. And then we wonder why, everybody's walking around and going, "Hey, big corporations, you bunch of platitudes, those words on the wall. Look how you treated my friend." So this, how we conduct ourselves in the marketplace, how we conduct ourselves when we make these decisions that affect human beings, has much more of an impact than I think we give it credence.
Yeah, that was a fantastic answer, Rusty. I really appreciate you, because I think that, as somebody who, I'm 30 now, so I've been in the workforce for about 10-ish years. But what you've articulated, specifically the generational trauma of working for big corporations, is something that I hear articulated by friends all the time. So I think that I think you really hit the nail on the head in terms of what it's like to be on the receiving end of a bad hiring decision. And I think that, to your point about why these decisions are so important, I think that you very succinctly described a situation that a lot of millennials and Gen Z specifically find themselves in on a day-to-day basis. I had a ton of questions I had written down, but I do want to talk about Faith Code, because I know that this is a big project that you've worked on. As someone who's done a lot of writing myself, who's in the midst of writing on a really big project, I know that it's really exciting to talk about these ideas when they're top of mind, when they're very fresh in your head. Near the intro, you said, change often comes as fast as a new idea can be implemented, and before ramifications have fully been considered. Progress is good in general, but there are also pitfalls. And as the world around us changes, topics such as calling, vocation, faith, purpose, ambition, character, and influence need to be constantly re-examined to be on top of our game. So I'm just curious what your perspective on somebody who has witnessed a lot of changes. What are some of these things when we're looking at our vocation, faith, purpose, ambition? What are these things that we should be comfortable letting go? And what do you think that we should be investing more time into?
Yeah. So thank you for actually pulling something out of the book. You'd be surprised how many podcasts that I do or interviews for the book where people are like, "So what? Yeah, I got this thing in front of me. Tell me about that. Tell me about that title. Tell me about that title." So Thomas Jefferson had a great quote that said something to this extent, and I'm paraphrasing him, but he said, "Our lives are like a rushing stream of water, that there are parts of our lives that we should just let float on top of the water and move. And then there are parts of our lives that are rocks in that water, in that stream, that should disrupt that flow, create a little turbulence around them, but hold steady too." And I subscribe to that. We are in a extraordinarily breakneck speed world. I mean, every day it just gets faster and faster and faster. And you don't have to look very far back. I mean, ChatGPT is only a year old as we're recording this, and look at the speed by which we now can prompt and gather data and get knowledge and get direction, get instruction. The minute you think it can't gets faster, our life gets faster. And when that happens, we end up in a place of gravitating to things that give us convenience and instant gratification, because we're conditioned to that. Mm-hmm. Right? I remember growing up in Southern Indiana when they built the first convenience store in our neighborhood. And it was like, are you kidding me? I can fill my car up. I can buy soda. I can get groceries. I can get the newspaper. I can get everything we want all in one place. And all of a sudden there was convenience, and we're like, wow, this is amazing. That's crazy. And then all of a sudden, the ATM showed up and you could actually bank at the convenience store. And this was like, wow. And then and it started getting us towards like, well, this is what we want. We want instant gratification. We want it now. Well, when you start to get in that mindset of wanting it now and wanting speed, there's dangers that come with that. The dangers are the unintended consequences of moving too fast, even though you think you are doing the right thing or going in the right direction. But the unintended consequences. And look, technology, our world of technology is filled with unintended consequences that nobody could have thought around the corner and thought that this thing that we keep with us almost 24/7 that we call our phone is not a phone, it's an appendage. It's an appendage. People predicted back in the 1950s and 1960s, the Institute of the Future in Palo Alto actually predicted pretty much everything that a smartphone would do for us would show up, but they missed one signal, is that the level of reliance we would have on it, that the addiction we would have to what's on this device, that we would feel out of touch, or we'd feel like we're missing out on something if we're not constantly using it. And that turned into a dependence. And I would go as far to say, for many of us, it's turned in, and I'll put myself in this category for certain things that are on my phone, it turns into an addiction.
For sure.
Right?
Unintended consequence at the end of the week. Yeah.
Yeah. Unintended consequence of going really fast, wanting instant gratification, wanting it now. And we will be susceptible to that for years and years and generations to come. However, if we have we got this rushing river. I mean, it's rushing past us. If we have some rocks that of course they erode over millions of years or thousands and thousands of years. They erode, and maybe they're gone and from that river. But in the meantime, they provide something with that. When that water hits it, yes, it creates turbulence. Yes, it does. But it gives you something to grab onto and hold on to that's always there. And those, going back to your values and principles and these elements of our faith itself being something that we can count on, that no matter how much the river rushes and how fast things move past us, that we can count on those being there. It's important. I think it's the only way. It's the only way that you don't just get rushed out with the river. And look, we see so many examples of it in our society. People who get fame and fortune and celebrity, and things come quickly to them, and they rush right past the world. And where do they end up? They end up washed out is where they end up. Mm-hmm. And we look at it and we go, oh, what a calamity. What a disaster. Well, what do you think happens when people don't have something to hold on to? Right?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
I remember in the early days of being out here in Silicon Valley, and this was right after the boom and bust of 2000. I was someplace, and there was a panel, and there was a kid that was talking about his startup, and he goes, "Yeah, I mean, things were roaring. I mean, it was unbelievable. The boom was phenomenal. He goes, I was 18 years old and I was given $5 million of funding at 18 years old. And somebody said, well, what'd you do with it? He goes, well, I blew it. I spent right through it. It was gone in a heartbeat. And then somebody else said, well, why'd you do that? He goes, because I was 18 years old and somebody gave me $5 million. Who would give $5 million to an 18-year-old?
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe that 18-year-old could have handled the $5 million if they'd had good grounding and people around him or things to hold on to. But without it, you get washed away. And that's what we try to get to in the faith code. In the faith code, we're trying to say, you know, there is a code. Those are lasting, timeless principles that if you subscribe to and believe in and follow, then all of the rest of this, you know, when it rushes past us or when it slams us against the wall or when it tries to blow us away, we got something to stand firm on, something to hold on to. Won't always be perfect, but we can go back to it and find what we're supposed to do, where we're supposed to be.
I love that. It's a great synopsis of the faith code. And I would say that even if you're not religious, I think that is a message that can speak to everybody. I think one of the greatest philosophical problems that have always been the enduring thing is like trying to get people to understand the importance of having character, not just for the sake of other people, but also for yourself. And so I think that's one of the things that faith code does well. But I really appreciate you coming on the show, Rusty. If anybody's interested in checking out the new book, it's called The Faith Code. I'll be putting all of the information in the show notes so that you can all check it out. But I just want to say thank you so much for stopping by, Rusty. It's been a wonderful conversation. I've learned so much about business and the importance of character, and I appreciate you sharing what you've learned with us.
Yeah, Johnny, my pleasure. And, you know, thanks for what you're doing. You know, there are people who, you know, are trying to figure this whole thing called life out. And, you know, what a great piece of technology, you know, the internet has given us with podcasts and our ability to dive into different areas and try to help ourselves. And so thanks for being a voice out there, trying to help others.
Of course. And same to you. Maybe we can do this again sometime.
Love to. Would love to.